Evening from Jerusalem. I'm Laura Kam, the Director of Communications at the Jewish People Policy Institute, an independent center for strategic planning and policy for the Jewish people in Israel and the diaspora. In light of the current crisis and ongoing war, JPPI will provide daily in-depth analysis and insights from Israel. Today, our audience will be joined by 3 JPPI senior fellows. Shmuel Rosner will open and moderate today's discussion, followed by Rivka Ravitz, a member of the Haredi community and former chief of staff to our 10th president, Ruvi Rivlin, and Gil Troy, historian, author, and prominent Zionist thinker. For our viewers, please ask your question in the chat box, and we will get back to you soon, as many as possible. Shmuel.
Thank you, Laura. This is our third day of doing this webinar, and we have a little change of roles here. I'm taking over from Yaakov Katz. He'll return tomorrow, and with me, as Laura mentioned, Rivka Ravitz, Senior Fellow at the Jewish People Policy Institute, and Gil Troy. And I would like to start, like we did yesterday, with a few of the headlines that are coming out of Israel. The events in Israel are moving fast, and to try and see the signal amid the noise, let's try and wrap up or do a summary of what happened in the last 24 hours. So first, the heads of the coalition parties in Israel authorized Prime Minister Netanyahu to act for the establishment of a national emergency government. This did not yet happen, but the politicians are working on it. The IDF keeps bombing in Gaza. Several senior Hamas leaders were killed in the last day, and Israel's southern territory is basically cleared from terrorists. But we need to say that Hamas keeps sending armed terrorists to Israel. On Zikim Beach, 4 militants infiltrated Israel and were killed. And also, there is still a chance or a fear that more groups of operatives are out and about waiting for a right moment to strike. Rockets were fired from Gaza on the south and on the Tel Aviv area. In the last hour, rockets from southern Lebanon were also fired on northern Israel. Schools are still off today and also tomorrow. Hamas says it's going to demand the release of prisoners in the United States in exchange for Americans that were abducted on Saturday. And the White House said that the first tranche of security assistance is on its way to Israel. Now let me turn to you first for just a minute or a minute and a half. Your headlines for today. Rivka, let's start with you. What's your headline for today?
So I'm not sure if there's just one, but I saw a picture, maybe that's my headline, of people taking part in the funeral of the soldier named Kaminka in Tzur Hadassah. And in the middle of the funeral, there was a siren. There were rockets firing on Israel. And people in the middle of the funeral had to lay down and put their hands on their heads. And that's a picture that meant a lot to me today.
Give your headline today. Please unmute yourself.
If I may, 3 quick headlines today. One, the devastating news I mentioned yesterday that a friend of my son's was missing, and this beautiful 22-year-old boy, his body was identified, and he'll be buried tomorrow. And one of the things we're hearing is that so many people, I'm sorry to say, were shot in the face. So many bodies were mutilated that it's been making the process very, very slow. And that just adds to the trauma. And we're hearing more and more stories now of people we know, the newlywed couple that just got married 3 months ago, and now the husband is being buried. And so the pain is growing. And the second thing is that you're nevertheless also seeing, as I said yesterday, tremendous resilience. But to just pick up on what Rivka said, my third headline is that indeed we're going to start seeing these funerals because it took so long. And I just want to be very clear. Yedidya Stern and I, the head of the JPPI, and we were talking about this, how many people, and especially Hamas, they look at the pain, they look at the tears, and they say, you see, look how weak the Jews are, how they cry. And I remember this during the worst days of the Palestinian terror 20 years ago, how Hamas leaders would say, you see, we can make Jews cry, and that shows how weak they are. And they don't understand. And it's both a deeply Jewish value and a liberal democratic value, that our tears are tears that only make us stronger. Our tears are like the tears of the Holocaust victims and the refugees from 850,000 refugees from Arab states who came here and turned their tears into building blocks. And our ability to cry and to weep shows also our ability to love and to build. And the nihilists think that the tears make us weak, but liberal Jewish Democrats understand that these tears are only going to make us stronger. And so I'm not afraid of these images we're going to have that are going to be so heartbreaking, because that heartbreak will also be the reminder to us and to my kids and to your kids who are serving and fighting, why we're fighting and why we're going to win.
And we should say that the heartbreak will repeat itself for, they say today, more than 1,000 times, because we crossed the 1,000 casualty threshold in the last 24 hours. So this is a devastating event. And as you said, we will see funerals today, tomorrow, and in the coming days until this ends. And you know, the war is still ongoing. So more casualties are likely to we will have to deal with more casualties, with the pain that's involved and with all the other things that are involved. Let me turn to more mundane things, but not less important. And I'll start with the politics. I'll try to explain what is happening in Israel's politics. And many Israelis, we should say, are somewhat disappointed that we do not yet see a unity government or an emergency government in Israel. This is something that many Israelis expected on the first and second day. Many commentators were urging the government to go in that direction early on. But this is a slow slog, and it takes our politicians some time to get there. However, in a meeting of the heads of the coalition this morning, the Prime Minister, as I said, was authorized to move forward with such plan. The current plan is to have at least few members of the Machaneh Mamlachti party, Generals Benny Gantz and Gadi Eisenkot, and maybe others. Both are former chiefs of the IDF. So they will, if this is finalized, they will join a smaller cabinet, a smaller war cabinet that will be authorized by the wider cabinet to make most of the important decisions concerning the conduct of the war. There are still some obstacles concerning other members of the coalition who are afraid that they will lose their ability to have impact or to influence the policy of Israel in the coming days. But I'd say hopefully, you know, this is not an opinion piece, but I think that I can speak from most Israelis when I say that hopefully our politicians will come around to form this war cabinet, because a unified Israel is essential for all of us as we look ahead to the difficult days that we are about to have. Our second topic for today, and Rivka, I would like to turn to you now, is the school system, education. I have a 16-year-old daughter. She's at home since the eve of Yom Kippur. So school stopped on the eve of Yom Kippur. Then she had a holiday between Yom Kippur and Sukkot, then the full week of Sukkot. And then the war started, and school was not yet resumed. You, Rivka, have 12 children. Not all of them are school children, but you probably understand what it means to be a parent or a teacher or anything else when schools aren't functioning. So please talk us through the education system situation.
So as you said, I'm a mother to 12, and school is almost 3 weeks off. Soon, in 2 days, it will be 3 full weeks that the children are all home. They were supposed to go back to school on Sunday, and that didn't happen. I'll tell you, this war caught me at home on Shabbat. My husband is a mayor. He's the mayor of a small town next to Jerusalem. And I don't know if you realize that, but Israeli mayors, they have a lot of responsibilities and authorities. And he was not home for the 3.5 last days. I was here by myself with my children, concerned about my oldest daughter. She's already 26, and she lives out in Samaria in a settlement with her 4 young children, getting along with the sirens there. And I'm here in a small, tiny shelter with the others that at home. And it doesn't seem like school. It was supposed to start again tomorrow, but then we got this all this firing now at the afternoon, and I don't think they will open schools now because it's really scary. There was a bomb falling on a school in Beitar Illit, and a child got injured. So I don't believe they will start schools this week at all, if I just look at the reality. That reminds me of the days that I used to work for 20 years with the president and with the Knesset. And then at all the states of emergencies, I always had to be at work, sometimes 24 hours a day, and leaving small children and at home, no school and nothing to do. And now when my husband is a mayor, as I said, again, they are all alone with me. So I hope, and my youngest, he's really suffering from anxiety from these sirens. Every time the siren starts, I have to open the music on and dance with him. He shouldn't hear the bombs because he's really scared of it. So these days are not easy, and I hope schools will open, but it has to be safe. It's not a joke.
And I also understand that there are difficulties with doing schooling via Zoom because of the fear of cyber attacks on certain classes or schools, and the fear that children will see on their home screens Hamas operatives shouting at them or threatening them or doing all kinds of things. So the education ministry, as I understand, restricted schools in their ability to use certain mechanisms for digital schooling.
Not using Zoom, using Team. It doesn't mean a lot to Haredi children because Haredi children don't use the internet for learning. They use the phone, and that's really bad. First of all, they are fighting about the phone because there's only 1 or 2 phones at home, and then it's really hard to learn with the phone. But yes, I heard there's no using of Zoom, just Team, because Team is safer, and they are scared of seeing those videos of captured people on like cyber attacks on our schooling system.
Gil, I'll turn to you now. The White House revealed that the first emergency equipment was already shipped to Israel. Talk to us about the importance of US support. This time we're not talking about US Jews, as we did yesterday. We're talking about the US administration. President Biden gave a very moving speech in the last hours of the war, a very convincing and moving speech. And since then, we've seen staunch support of the US administration to Israel. Is this really important?
Before I get to President Biden, I want to mention my new hero, who's a man by the name of John Kirby, who is a national security spokesperson who was briefing CNN, I believe, and he was describing what happened, and he got choked up. And in that moment, I think we saw something profound happen. We saw what we've been saying, many of us have been saying for years, that whatever noise and static there may be in the US-Israel relationship, over settlements, over occupation, over all kinds of issues that can emerge, over personalities, go back to the Bibi Obama days, there is a fundamental connection, not just between the United States government and Israel, but between the American people and the Jewish people and certainly the people of Israel. And in that non-Jews, technocratic approach to things, which all of a sudden fell and became a very human response to the just disgusting massacre we saw it all. And unfortunately, because we live in the real world, it also has to be expressed in other ways. I think Biden's language has been very, very important. I think the symbolic gesture and also the military gesture of moving the USS Gerald Ford aircraft toward the north of Israel to make it very clear to Hezbollah and to Iran that this is not acceptable is very important. And so I think what we're really seeing is that the massacre, and let's go back. Many people throwing Holocaust analogies. We heard about stories of the Holocaust. We saw one or two images from the Holocaust, right? There's that famous image of the little boy, right? It became so ubiquitous because it was so rare. The fact that these people not only perpetuated this massacre, but then also delightfully, gleefully spread it all over on that very medium that we were afraid were moving the American people and the Jewish people apart from Israel, social media, has been profound. And people are saying this goes too far. And this is no longer about territory. This is no longer about what Israel did right or anything. This is about right and wrong. And so I think what we're seeing both in the American people and in the American government is a clarity. And frankly, we're also seeing it in the European governments. We're seeing it in the Eiffel Tower and the Empire State Building and Brandenburg Gate being lit in blue and white. And I think at this moment of tremendous pain in Israel, getting that hug and getting that military support, and I think if I read correctly, the first waves of actual military support are also just now leaving Washington and leaving the United States and coming to Israel. A very powerful reminder of how the United States was so important in the second round of Yom Kippur fighting 50 years ago. We're seeing all the power of that enduring relationship, which really transcends politics and transcends petty moments. And this is really a profound moment of friendship and of connectedness.
Can you say something about the bipartisan nature of the support? Because we know that Israel had become a wedge issue for many American politicians and activists. And the issue of whether this support for Israel comes from the left or from the right, from this president or that president, became something of a conversation topic.
So indeed, these days in the United States of America, unlike Israel, everything becomes partisan and everything becomes about the Great Division. And we've certainly seen, we saw ex-President Trump try to emphasize that had he been president, this never would have happened. Had he been president, Iran would be tamed. I don't want to get into commenting on the partisanship of it, but what's interesting is that some of the Republicans are trying to push the line that, oh, it's the Democrats who are anti-Israel. And yet what we're seeing is through Joe Biden's movements that there is a kind of bipartisan moment. And so I would urge my American friends, for a long time I've been begging my Republican friends, don't make support for Israel a wedge issue. It's actually very healthy, very, very healthy for a society, for a democracy, to have some issues on which left and right can agree, some issues on which Republicans and Democrats can agree. I've all along said that this isn't just a gift to Israel, but it's a gift to the American people, because we need some things where we can put partisanship aside. So I've been begging my Republican friends for a decade now, don't make it partisan. And I've been begging my Democratic friends, and this is going to be a looming issue, you have a problem. You have a small but very loud and disproportionately important group in the Democratic Party, known as the Squad. We also saw the rally of the Democratic Socialists of America. We've seen other rallies who have shown their true colors, that even amidst all the bloodshed, they still have to denounce Israel. And I need my Democratic friends to start calling them out. I need my Democratic friends to say, I don't want your endorsement. I need my Democratic friends to say, if we truly want to make this a bipartisan issue, it also means calling out those people in our very party who are so filled with hatred that they cannot see this as a human moment and as a measure of right or wrong. They're still trying to make it left versus right.
Yes, and I would add a note about Israelis in that situation. We know that also Israelis, and I know this from conducting polling in Israel in the last several years, Israelis tended to think in recent years, or maybe in the last 2 decades, that the Republican Party is much more supportive of Israel and the Democratic Party is less so. Many of them are highly suspicious of democratic presidents. And I think that in some way, what President Biden did this week convinced at least some of these Israelis that when it comes to President Biden, he is a man that Israel can trust. I think that they saw his true colors, and they understood that trying to diminish or trying to doubt his commitment to Israel would not be a wise thing to do. And you see such expressions of gratitude and understanding even in Israeli quarters that tended to be more suspicious of a democratic president 2 weeks ago or 2 months ago or 2 years ago. And I think that's also very important. Do you agree?
Yeah, if I may, it was becoming not only a political issue, but a cultural issue, right? We were starting to say that, Israel is a red state and that the Democrats are not only blue, but that American Jews live in blue states. And we were trying to emphasize the differences. And here the Palestinians, once again, were their own worst enemies and our best friends, at least in the propaganda wars, which are so much more important to them than to us. When Bono, the international superstar and very much man of the left, devotes a song of his to the suffering people of Israel, and he says, those are our people. The people, and he specifies the people at the music festival, like my beautiful friend Ben, they were my people, they were our people. And we have to support them. Then we see a cultural shift happening. And one of the things I think we as a Jewish People Policy Institute and we as a Jewish people have to think about over the next couple of months is how do we take advantage of this moment? It happened. So how do we learn from it, but also how do we reframe, not just going back to bipartisanship, that's not going to work, but also understanding the cultural, ideological, existential ties that unite us. It goes back to the post-Holocaust covenant between the American people and the Jewish people, and between American politicians from George McGovern and Jimmy Carter at the beginning of his career to John Kennedy and Richard Nixon and Dwight Eisenhower understood that the lesson of the Shoah, the lesson of the Holocaust, was we need a state of Israel. And the lesson of October 7th was we need a state of Israel which can defend itself, or we have blood on the streets.
Well, people who listen to you might suspect that you are a historian of American presidential politics.
Guilty as charged. That's guilty. That's a name of that's play on my name.
Rivka, I would like to move from the international arena back to Israeli society. And with you, I would like to touch upon a sensitive issue. Let's be frank and honest about the fact that this is a sensitive issue. The participation or non-participation of the Haredi, the ultra-Orthodox community in the war effort in Israel. We know that the tensions between non-Haredi and Haredis in Israel just before the war was almost at its peak. Israel was looking forward to a winter term of the Knesset in which legislation aimed at letting all Haredis off military service was planned, was slated to pass. So tensions were at their peak, and then the war started. So how do we look at the situation, the social situation, the participation of Haredis in this current moment?
So this is really a delicate social reality. Haredi yeshiva boys, the older ones, they were supposed to have a week off this week. This is one of the only vacation. They have 3 weeks off a year. But rabbis and the leaders of the Haredi community in Israel got together and decided that they will go back to yeshiva today and start learning. And that the reason is really what you said. Well, the issue of serving the army, not serving the army is really a very delicate issue. And it was one of the main issues of the protests at the last summer we went through. So the rabbis and the leaders of the Haredi community said it can't be that we don't take part in serving the army because of learning Torah, but we'll be in a week off when so many soldiers are fighting on their lives. So they all went back. As a Haredi woman and mom, and we believe that Torah and davening really protects the Jewish nation, and that's the right way they could give the hand and take part in this terrible situation. But again, it's a debate. It's a debate also in the community. And, because of it being such a debate and sometimes even giving people such a bad feeling. So I could tell you there's tremendous groups of women and men trying to do things for the soldiers. Yesterday, we were cooking until the middle of the night, and then in a kitchen of a friend of mine in Beit Vegan in Jerusalem. And then she was packing the food and sending it down to the south. And then another friend collected money from all of us, and then she went to buy some underwear and toiletries that soldiers were missing. You could look at all the Haredi news papers, online newspapers like Hikar Shabbat and things like that, and you'll see collecting money, Yehudat Tzala, Zaka, trying to give a hand. And again, I'm not running. It's not an easy issue for a Haredi community at this point.
Do you think that the current situation will bring about some kind of soul search or a change or a new way to have this conversation, or you assume that after the war things will go back to their previous normal?
Do you think that things between right and left in Israel will come back to normal after the war?
I expect that the war will bring
Changes?
about some changes in Israel's political arena. This is the type of social traumas that tend to end up in changing the political landscape. We saw it after the Yom Kippur War. We saw it during the Second Intifada, and I think it is much too soon to predict what's going to happen after the war that merrily started, but what we've seen in the last couple of days could ignite a process of change in Israel society. So that's why I'm asking you about the Haredi community.
We could just hope, but I'll still tell you as a mom that I'm really thrilled of my boys sitting and learning Torah. And my youngest, he's just 14 and a half. He's not feeling well. He was sick, but I didn't see him since 6 o'clock in the morning. He went out to yeshiva, and I didn't hear from him. He's still learning and davening. They are saying all Tehillim together with all the small children that going in 10 after 10 because you can't go more than 10 in, saying Tehillim with the boys, and we could just hope things will change and we should be more devoted.
Gil, last question to you. The American university campus scene. We hear reports about certain events that, can we say, that are troubling to the Israeli ear? So please walk us through the situation.
Troubling is far too diplomatic. To think of spoiled students sitting there in their wonderful campuses and delighting in the destruction of human beings, of not having a moral center and not having the moral clarity to say, you know what, I might be pro-Palestinian, I might have my criticisms of Israel, but I'm going to yell 700, 700 back when the number was 700 dead. To have 31 student organizations at Harvard University, I'm sorry, 34 student organizations at Harvard University, 3 of which mention women in their title, denounce Israel and say this, everything that happened is on Israel. Shows, what George Orwell said about intellectuals having perhaps big brains, but not much sense. I want to caution us, however. I don't want us to spend too much time worrying about student politics. Perhaps I'm too much of a snobby professor. Student politics have their own trends. What's more disturbing to me, and I say this as a Harvard alum and as a McGill patriot who taught at McGill for many, many years and thinks both of them are outstanding institutions. When both institutions issued responses after October 7th that were so mealy-mouthed, that were so vague, that spoke about the conflict and didn't have strong moral clarity, that to me is much more nerve-wracking and much more unnerving than 34 silly organizations at Harvard and Yale and Columbia. And even worse, and I'll be very happy to share this if we have any websites. I put together a document of the Harvard statement and the McGill statement responding to October 7th, and the Harvard statement and the McGill statement responding to the Russian invasion of the Ukraine. This will not stand, we heard about the Ukrainian invasion. This is an outrage, we heard about the Ukrainian invasion. And the McGill word soup, and it was also, by the way, as a writer, just distressing how mushy it all was, went straight to worries about wellness and listening to one another. But the inability of these elite institutions to have what my mother would have said, the seichel, the intelligence, but also the menschlichkeit, the morality, to say this crosses all the red lines, and this goes against every civilized value, and this goes against every value that the university stands for. That to me is a much greater outrage because it's also a much deeper systemic rot. Student trends will shift in the next 2, 3, 4 years, but the inability of our professors and our administrators to understand what's going on is really, really scary. But I'm happy to say that from former President Larry Summers, who said he's never been so embarrassed in 50 years of Harvard affiliation, to over 2,100 alumni who signed a petition, to the hundreds who have had vigils at Harvard, and I just spoke to a friend of mine, his daughter's at Yale. There's also a balance, and I'm hoping, just as you're saying that there's been a shift, that there will be a shift in Israeli politics, I'm hoping that there'll be a shift not just in the American cultural conversation I was talking about, but in the American progressive conversation, and the American student conversation, understanding that you can pass on your criticisms of Israel here and there, but the language that's been going on, that's been building for decades now about racism, colonialism, imperialism, apartheid, making Israel guilty of every Western crime when Israel's not, doesn't fit into the Western box, and it's actually a form of cultural imperialism. Using phrases now, once it becomes trendy, so you have a problem with white supremacy, so you start talking about Jewish supremacy, constantly putting Israel into the meat grinder and making it the piñata of the campus has got to end. And the fish stinks, they say, from the head down. And so the problem much more is on the level of presidents of university who are terrified of their own students. And we need to hear donors, we need to hear alumni, we need to hear parents, and we need to hear students saying, you let me down. And I'm proud to say that there's a group of McGill faculty who are circulating a petition, and we're not going to be quiet. We're not just sending it to the president of the university, shush still. We're spreading it to the media because this crossed too many red lines, both the behavior there, as well as, of course, obviously the behavior here.
Gil, Rivka, thank you. Our half an hour is up, and we will be here again tomorrow. I will turn it back to you, Laura. I know you have some things to say before we wrap it up and say goodbye for today.
Thank you. Thank you to all my colleagues. This has been a JPPI Daily Inside Analysis. Tune in again tomorrow at 1800 Israel time as our roving roster of experts will communicate with you through this daily webinar and subsequent podcasts available on Spotify and Apple Podcasts for as long as the crisis in Israel continues. Additionally, many individuals from abroad have asked how they can directly support Israel at this time. Contact us at info@jppi.org.il, and we will promptly respond with relevant information. Good night from Jerusalem.